to start with talking about the conference finals. The games that obviously we saw Tuesday night and then last night at the time of this recording on Thursday. Tonight is game two between the Pacers and the Celtics. And Austin, I don't know what to make of the Indiana Pacers because to me, like Tyrese Haliburton, I think he's a very good player. I don't think he's a superstar yet. Pascal Siakam, we know he's a very good player. Miles Turner, he's a very good player. But historically, like you need a superstar to lead you to a conference finals. And I have made the argument that it does feel like hey, Giannis Antetokounmpo didn't play in the first round against Milwaukee. Chris Middleton essentially beat him by himself in Game 5. Then it took him 7 games to beat a New York Knicks team that was pretty much beat all to hell and didn't have any people left. And yet, besides that, they had Game 1 won against Boston and they let them off the hook. And I feel like that's a Cavs Golden State 2018 situation where I don't know if you can recover from it. What do you make of the Indiana Pacers? Like, that's my first. I never thought I would ask you that, but that's my first question. What the hell do you make of the Indiana freaking Pacers?
Before I answer that, it kind of makes you think, and I'm going to kind of gauge the Cavs, then come back to the question. It kind of makes you think that you shouldn't have tanked that final game at the regular season, because if they didn't, in the Cavaliers' eyes, you don't tank that game. Maybe you're the team that's Indiana right now. It was a really easy side of the bracket. Indiana. The one thing I will give credit for with Indiana is they always find ways to win. And I think the thing that really stands out to me is their pace of play. That pace of play is ridiculous. They go up and down the court so fast. They try to push the tempo early on in all game. Like, you need to be well conditioned against the Indiana Pacers, because if you aren't, you're going to get tired and they're going to just, it's a track meet when you always play Indiana. And I think they're the classic case of having a really good offense. They were a top 3 offense in the league this year. They just offensively were able to find ways to win. And I don't want to sit here and say that Indiana is like not supposed to be in this position, because they made it this far. You can't say that. I think that at the end of the day, with Giannis being hurt, kind of the Bucks being hurt, and Doc Rivers is Doc Rivers. He's not a good coach. We've seen that time and time again. Yeah, the Pacers should have won that series. New York was the one I was a little concerned about, but I looked at that series and I was like, well, Indiana played them really well 3 times this year, and they beat them 1 time. And yeah, New York lost players because Thibodeau likes to run his guys into the ground, which is never a recipe for success. So I was just as shocked as everyone else was when they won Game 7, but the Jalen Brunson injury kind of cemented that. Regardless, I think this Indiana Pacers team is, I think they're a team that literally is a year away, but they're kind of in the situation where they were on a weak side of the bracket. They got lucky with the draw. They were able to win their first 2 rounds. Now they're playing Boston, and they played them great Game 1, because now no one believes, including myself, I don't believe they're winning the series.
Oh
But
no, nobody believed going in, which is why I thought Indiana had to steal that game Tuesday night to make it a series. Because, like I just said, now it feels like to me a Cavs Golden State situation where like game one is the game you had to have. You actually blew the game. There's no way around saying it. You blew the game yourself. And now to me, it feels like they may get one at home just because they'll play very well at home, but it does feel like a 4 or 5 game series now.
it's going to be 5. I think that, and honestly, I could honestly see it being 4. Like, I really can.
Yeah, no, I
I
could
could
do.
see it being a sweep, but you have to look at what the Celtics have done every series. They've always let the other team grab a game. I think that's going to happen again at some point this series, and it's probably going to be in Indiana, considering Indiana plays their best playoff basketball at home. And that's another strong suit of Boston, however, is they play very good basketball on the road. So I think that, kind of, if you got to put those head and head, I think Indiana will grab one. I definitely think that Boston wins tonight. They're going to go up 2-0. Indiana had their chance. They didn't do it. They blew it away. They choked it, however you want to phrase it. They let it slip away. And this is why, in the situation they were in, you foul. You foul before they get the shot up, because it's 2 shots. That's the modern day NBAs. You foul before that, so you avoid a shot like that. I know it sucks that you don't see game tying shots or game winning shots anymore, but you're trying to win games, right? And
No,
ultimately, it's still one game.
absolutely, you're right. And I will say this too, and tell me if you agree or disagree. Listen, Boston, to me, they got a huge break the first two rounds. They didn't get to play Jimmy Butler at all in the first round. Second round, they don't get to play Jared Allen. They don't get to play Donovan Mitchell the last two games. And, after what happened in game one, and I got to give some credit to Jaylen Brown, who made maybe the clutchest shot in the NBA since that Kawhi Leonard 2019 game seven shot against the Sixers. It does. And I said this, yesterday on the show. It feels to me like the NBA gods this year are saying this is Boston's year.
Yeah, I think you're right, except for if we start talking about the Western Conference, I believe that there's only one team in the current playoff left that can beat this current Boston team. And if that team does not advance, I believe Boston will win it all. And the Clippers pick obviously bit me, and so did the Knicks as well. Because I thought
In your defense, and I said this about Clippers and Dallas, I thought that series was going to come down to Kawhi Leonard's health, and
it did.
obviously he did not play, so I ended up going with Dallas. I said that they'd probably beat Oklahoma City. I thought Oklahoma City was a year away, but I thought Dallas would run into Denver, and
Mm.
if you would have told me that the Nuggets were down 2-0 to Minnesota, I felt like I was the only person in the world to say that series was not over because you never count out the champion. When they go up 3-2 and they kind of just mailed it in game six, as it felt like they just wanted to go at home and play game seven at home. But if you would have told me Jokic nearly has a triple double in the first half of game seven, Jamal Murray goes for 20 plus, they're up 20 points in the third quarter, and Michael Porter, KCP, Christian Braun, Aaron Gordon do absolutely nothing in the second half. Nikola Jokic, in my opinion, becomes a little bit passive, is not as aggressive. Jamal Murray practically gets shut out till it's kind of too late in the fourth quarter. And Denver just completely melts down to a Minnesota team where Anthony Edwards, who is getting obviously all these comparisons, the next great player in the NBA, goes 6 for 18, shoots 33% from the field, and Minnesota wins that game. I couldn't believe what I was watching, Austin.
I couldn't believe it either, but it's the narrative that I saw in the first round, and it was the narrative that ended up becoming what happened in the last series, where the Minnesota Timberwolves have I have not seen this in a very long time. They have one of the most infectious defenses I have ever witnessed on the court. And how they operate is pretty simple. You have Carl Anthony Towns, who spreads the floor. He's a tall guy. He's a power forward. You need that in the new modern day NBA. You have Anthony Edwards, who is a budding superstar. He plays amazing defense. He's aggressive. He's a leader, and he can make his shots. It's not like he's just some bozo. No, like he's a star. He's really good. And Mike Conley, another veteran point guard that they have, he's been in plenty of playoffs. Obviously, this is his second Western Conference Finals ever in his career because, Memphis was not that good of an organization for all those years. But the way Minnesota plays is alarming. Now, again, they did lose game one to Luka and Kyrie. I don't know if that's going to be sustainable for Dallas moving forward.
No, but the thing I'd worried about if I was from a Timberwolves standpoint, not to interrupt you, but Minnesota got balanced scoring. And Jaden Daniels went for 20 plus, and Kyle Anderson chipped in a couple threes, and Mike Conley gave you 10, 15 points, and you still watch that game. Now, I think from a Dallas perspective, it is sort of a Luka Kyrie show, but I also feel like Dallas also rebounding wise and board wise, Lively's done better as a rookie than I think anybody of us has, expected. And to me, what we've seen in these NBA playoffs is, for example, in this Western Conference, it will be Luka and Kyrie will essentially cancel out Cat and Ant. Which role players are going to play well? And seemingly the role players have played better on the road than at home, which is something we've never really seen before.
Yeah, the role players for Dallas have played very well, and I will give them a lot of credit because a lot of these games that they do win, they do play well on the road. And I think it's partially because you look at who's on the team. When you look at a guy like Luka Doncic and a guy like Kyrie Irving, where it's like, listen, those are guys who have been in the playoffs. Kyrie's an NBA champion. People tend to forget that because, he's on his fifth team
Well,
in
it
like
feels
4
so
to
long ago.
10
I mean,
many
it
years.
was 8 years ago.
Yeah, like Kyrie Irving and Luka know how to play the game of basketball at the highest levels, and we've seen that for years already now. But again, those role players adapt to what those star players bring to the table, and they just fit like a puzzle. It's every game where, they make the timely shots, they make the timely defensive stops. PJ Washington has had an absolutely amazing playoffs up until this point. He's been very well. You get Derrick Jones Jr., who he's a high flyer, makes great defensive plays. He gets your occasional 1 to 2 threes a game. But the guy that I've really been surprised with the most on the Dallas Mavericks before I switch over to the Timberwolves, the guy I've really been surprised about is, like you said, Derek Lively, who gets these rebounds and is a paint presence. That dude has been very good all postseason. He might not get the points, but his paint presence shows. And on the Timberwolves side of things, Jaden McDaniels has had one hell of a playoffs. He plays defense. His scoring has went up. He's been very good for the Minnesota Timberwolves and Micah Nori / Chris Finch, however you want to look at who the coach was. And, obviously it's Micah Nori now. But still, these role players for both these teams, to kind of sum it up, they've been very well. And again, we all know the West seems like it's a whole team effort rather than you have your stars. That's more in the East, you see that. Where the West is a whole team effort. They do very well. And this is why they're at where they're at right now. And I think I said this before, obviously talking to you earlier in the week. I think it's going to happen again. This is going to probably be a 7-game series. This looks like it's going to be a 7-game series, unlike the Eastern Conference Finals. And the one team that I think that's going to come away is Minnesota. Now, if Minnesota just, shats the bed, then, I don't know how inclined I'd feel like in seeing a Dallas Celtics finals, but
So do
Minnesota
you so
wins.
so
Oh,
you feel like Minnesota's the team that can handle Boston? Can you explain why?
defense wins championships in any sport. I think that if you have an infectious defense the way Minnesota does and how they have their defense turn into very good offense, that is going to win games. That is going to make teams flustered. You saw what happened with Denver. Denver was a very good offensive team, and Minnesota shut them down. They shut them down 4 games out of the 7. And that game 2 is what stuck out to me last round, with Denver getting blasted all game long with how great that Minnesota defense was. Minnesota swept the Suns. I mean, this isn't by mistake. That defense is good. Now, will it catch up to them with Luke and Kyrie having experience? I don't know. I don't think it will, because I think that defense has been a good unit all year long. They're the number 1 defense in the NBA. I think if Minnesota goes to the finals and they play Boston, even though Boston's a hell of a team, defense wins championships. And I think the Timberwolves could win that in 6 or 7. They already
So
beat a team that we didn't think that they were going to beat in Denver. I think that they would do it with Boston as well.
So let me throw this at you, Austin. Somebody had brought it up to me the other day on the show, and it is this fact that nobody has seen a guy like Anthony Edwards do what he's currently doing at this young of an age since one of LeBron Raymond James did it with the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2007. And I think you can make the argument if the Minnesota Timberwolves this year win the NBA championship and Anthony Edwards, the key catalog, and wins Finals MVP and is the key cog in that. Could you make the argument that at his current age, we had never seen anybody have this level of success this early in the history of the NBA?
I think the only person that you look at who did have, and again, I'm going to go many moons ago, outside of LeBron, Michael Jordan did the same thing with those Bulls. And obviously, Michael Jordan didn't win the titles early on, but you saw what he did against Boston in that series. Like, what was it, 86 or 85?
Yeah,
Like,
but that's my
you
point.
saw
Is
what
he
he
didn't win
did,
the
and he
title?
just, yeah, like, and I get that they didn't win a title. I understand that, but he put the league on notice. Okay,
Yes.
he put the league on notice because that's an amazing playoff effort for multiple games. But no, this is the only outside of LeBron and what he did. Yeah, Anthony Edwards would kind of fit the bill. The only person I would think of kind of similar to that would be a Michael Jordan, but obviously Michael and the Bulls were not
Like maybe
number one
Magic
quarterback.
Johnson back in the day when he first came in with the Lakers.
Yeah, but man, I don't know. I feel like there was just a whole bunch that kind of went well when Magic went there.
Yeah.
Obviously, getting the new coach, kind of retooling the roster the way they did. And, the way Magic just played, how tall he was and how he was a point guard distributor while also maintaining the size of him being able to crash the boards and having that length. So I think outside of like obviously the big, big, big guys that we've all talked about and heralded for years in the NBA, those legends, I have not seen anything like this in a long time. And I think if Anthony Edwards wins this series and he wins the NBA Finals, I'm going to say it right now, he's the face of the league.
Okay, so we talked about the four teams that are in the conference finals. Let's go into our hometown team. There's a lot to talk about with these Cleveland Cavaliers, who I am going to be honest with you, and it may be seen as pessimistic, but I did not think that this Cavs playoff run was successful. I thought that it was a joke that this series took 7 games against Orlando. I thought for 3 out of the 7 games, Pablo Banchero was the best player in the series. Donovan Mitchell clearly rose and shone in Game 7 and got the Cavs over the hump. But really, the Cavs were just better than Orlando, but Orlando was never afraid of the Cavs. And then you get to the series against Boston, which I give the Cavs all the credit in the world for winning Game 2. But I was most disappointed in Game 3 because the game was never really close. Boston was really, it was like a 8 to 10 point game all half. They really controlled most of the game. And then Game 4 and Game 5, I didn't really care what effort the Cavs put in. You just kind of knew they weren't going to win those games, no matter how close they were. Donovan Mitchell was not out there. Evan Mobley had a few good games. Garland came on to me way too little too late. Now we know officially that Coach JB Bickerstaff is gone, which I know you've seen my TikToks. You know my feeling on that. I'm happy that's the case. And you had alluded to, before the show, us talking that you think it was more of a Donovan Mitchell decision. I am not so sure that this is a situation where, yes, Mitchell could sign a long-term extension. But what if next year we're in this same situation again where the Cavs get flamed down in the first or second round? I mean, we've seen it all the time from stars in the NBA. Guys sign a big-time contract extension, and a year later, they're making trade requests.
I think that Donovan Mitchell would be a fool to go anywhere else for the simple reason that money's money. The Cavs can offer him more than anyone else because they have bird rights. But again, I don't think they make this move like you've already said. I don't think they make this JB Bickerstaff firing unless someone signed off on it, and who would have? It would have been Donovan Mitchell, the guy that you're actively trying to negotiate a new deal for. And I just think that Donovan, the way he's acted, he's refuted every report of him saying that he did not like the maturity of his teammates, and he's refuted reports of saying, oh, I like the whole I don't like Cleveland stuff. He's refuted all that on social media. He's even called out national reporters. I am bought in on the fact that Donovan Mitchell wants to stay in Cleveland, and I think it's going to be around 4 or 5 years. If I were to call my shot right now, I'd say 4 years, around 210 mil. I think that they are sold and ready to say, hey, we're going to do anything, whatever you want within reason. We're going to offer you the extension. If you're down to be the face, then great. And from what we saw last series with a potential someone going to that Game 4, maybe this move is pre-orchestrated, premeditated, because that certain someone is trying to force another team's hand. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's fun to dream about that stuff.
Well,
I think
it
regardless,
is
this
it
move
is
did
fun
have
to
to
dream
happen.
about, but unlike the last 2 times, I have been shutting it down. I don't think that certain someone is coming back here. I think he is going to wind back up with the Lakers because it's a similar situation with the Cavs. I said that they wouldn't have fired JB 2.0, as I call him, in Darvin Ham. But with that being said, I'm going to watch you play Kobe Allman. I'm going to watch you play the GM here. To me, like, I think this roster needs more shuffling than what some people have said. Obviously, Garland and Allen are the two names that have been thrown out there. But I even think, like, if I'm the GM, I'm shopping Levert. I'm shopping Okoro because I don't trust those two guys at all in the playoffs. It's just inconsistency up and down. George Niang completely out of the rotation. Marcus Morris was a revelation for 1 or 2 games. Um, I think that this team really, in my opinion, would be sort of you take Mitchell and you sort of make him your one. You find a bigger guy who could play that too. And maybe you find a bigger three to where Struz can be your catalyst off the bench. Like that's what I'm kind of thinking because I think outside of Mitchell and outside of him and Garland now working together, the biggest thing is when Mitchell leaves the court, nobody else can initiate the offense.
If you're going to let me play GM, the first team I'm calling is the Phoenix Suns. That's the
Okay.
first team I'm calling. I'm calling the Phoenix Suns because I want to know what their thought process is on how Kevin Durant and Devin Booker hold up. And I'm going to be honest. I think you can make a trade package right now. And I've saw this video on TikTok before. I like this method of thinking a lot. What if the Suns are like, man, we really don't want to bottom out with Kevin Durant? He's getting up there in age. He's one of the top 15 greatest scorers of all time. It's just not going to work with him and Devin Booker. Let's just part our ways now. You can offer a lucrative package where you can send Jared Allen, Darius Garland for Yusuf Nurkic and Kevin Durant, and I do that in a heartbeat. If Phoenix was thinking, let's try and get younger and get a
Oh
younger.
yeah, for sure. Because as we know with Durant, he's not a leader. He is one of the best hoopers ever, but he just goes out there and get buckets. And I really want to know your opinion on this because I think this is the argument I have battled with people on for what feels like the last 2 years. And I understand because people like Brian Windhorst have come out and have said, listen, in today's NBA, Evan Mobley is a center. And I personally don't see that. I don't think he has the body to consistently take the pounding for 82 games, be a center in the NBA. To me, he has the body of Duncan, a Garnett, which both played the four in their careers. And I know, and it bothers me too that obviously Jared Allen didn't take the pain injections, and it sounds like the Cavs and Jared Allen are getting ready for a divorce. But there are some moments when I look and I say, if Mobley could become more of a stretch four and shoot the ball, Mobley and Allen could work together.
Yeah, and you saw that kind of midway through the year after All-Star break. You kind of saw a little of that because Evan Mobley was willing to take more threes. You've
Yes.
seen it some games, and everyone in Cleveland Cavaliers basketball land was like, yes, shoot threes, because now you see guys like Chet Holmgren. He shoots a competent three ball. You see, I won't say Giannis shoots a competent three ball, but he shoots threes.
He can
He
shoot
shoots
him,
threes.
yeah.
He tries to stretch the floor. I mean, you're trying to, and Yusuf Nurkic, I just said him last segment. He stretches the floor as well. He gets boards. He can shoot the occasional three ball. Embiid, Jokic, the list goes on. I think if Evan Mobley has a coach who is willing to let him develop, and this is another flaw that JB Bickerstaff had. Why aren't you letting your power forward shoot more? Why? Why are you trying to run two power? Why are you trying to run two big guys in the paint to create this insane rebounding method where most of the time you're getting bodied by the other team? It just makes no sense. And this is why JB Bickerstaff had to go, because his rotations most of the time did not work. And just the way you can't let your third overall pick develop. No. And I think a new coach, whoever it may be, I'm going to vouch for JJ Redick. I think JJ Redick would be the perfect guy, just like Stephen Vogt is for the Guardians. You bring in a younger guy who recently retired, who knows the way of the land and how it's constructed right now. You bring someone like that in, you're going to be ahead of the game. And it's just like Steve Kerr. I wasn't saying like Steve Kerr wasn't recently retired when he took the Golden State job, but he was able to formulate an offense with what they had. You bring in a JJ Redick, this team is going to be a top 3 team in the East next year, regardless. And he will let guys like Mobley develop. He will let Donovan Mitchell know his limits and know his ways. JJ Redick would make too much sense to me, and it'd be his first head coaching job with the team that's pretty good. So I don't know. That's just how I look at it. Mike Inori is another name I look at with the Timberwolves as well. Regardless, you need to let your players who you are focusing on, like Donovan Mitchell, because I think he'll sign the extension. You need to let a guy like Evan Mobley develop properly and be the center. You need to have him be a stretch five, honestly. Just let him shoot and be the center. Well, do something like what OKC does right now. If you can replicate OKC's offense, you're going to be pretty good. That's all I'm going to say.
I also think bench wise, you need to get a lot more shooters.
Yeah, and
And
Okoro, I like Okoro a lot. Don't get me wrong; he showed very promising offensive flashes in this season, but he is going to be a free agent next year. Just want to throw that out there. I don't know if the Cavs are going to attempt to try and
to
re-sign
me,
him.
it's
I think
taken
they're
him
too
four
much
to
money.
5 years. I get he's a good defender, but he's too inconsistent for me. Like same thing with Levert. He has ability, but it's like once every 5 nights. It's not every night. I cannot stand watching players that you don't know what you can have one of those on your team. The Cavs had them with J.R. Smith. They're in their championship runs. JR would either be run on, he could shoot the hell out of it. Some nights he'd go cold, but it goes back to the Greg Popovich one knucklehead theory, right? You can have one of those, you can't have three or four of them.
Yeah, it's. I just think that when you have the players on this roster that the Cavs currently have, and you know you're going to be shopping Darius Garland, that's if Donovan, if he does sign, Darius is going to be gone. I don't know where
Yes.
it's going to go. He'll be gone. I think you could easily, another name that I would like to see the Cavs maybe try and make an attempt to go get. It's been mentioned and floated in the past. Why don't you go get a guy like Brandon Ingram? Brandon Ingram's a good power. He's a good small forward that can space the floor. He's tall and he can shoot. You package Jared Allen in a deal because Valanciunas is going to be a free agent, I'm pretty sure. Do you want to go get a guy who can, solidify how you are on the boards with New Orleans? I don't know. Like that, these are just the questions that teams
Ingram's
are going to be asking.
good. I don't know if he's, and this would go back to Mobley's for a moment. If you could tell me Mobley's my two and Ingram's my three, I'd be okay with that. But if you're telling me that Mobley would still be in essence the third option and Ingram would either be like 2B or another third option, then I don't think it's enough.
It Man, Kobe Altman's just going to have a lot of decisions to have this offseason. I don't know where he starts. I mean, actually, scratch that. We know where he's going to start. He's going to try and get the extension. But after you either fail or succeed with the extension, I don't know where you begin with some of the players. I do think Karras may get shopped. We know Allen and Garland will get shopped. Niang, there's no way in hell I let Niang back on the court. He stinks. I met him in the summer last year. Great individual. But regardless, that dude, you signed him to make threes, and he didn't do anything. He had one 34-point game against the Bucks, and that was it. Like, regardless, Niang's gonna be gone. Okoro may be gone. You're gonna have a huge roster rehaul. But again, I think depending on who the next head coach is, I'm hoping it's JJ Redick. I really am. Because if it's JJ Redick, there's endless possibilities. But you don't know until that head coach really gets hired. And
All
I
right,
think a guy
so
like James Borrego or Kenny Atkinson or Borrego are not going to cut it. I'm sorry.
So I'm gonna ask you. You already talked about the Suns, and obviously, I think we both agree they need to make a move. They need to blow it up. It sounds like that they're gonna run it back. Whatever. I don't get it. But I want to ask you about two other teams real quickly. I'm gonna ask you about your NBA Finals pick. What the hell do you do if you're the Clippers? Kawhi is never healthy. Paul George, you probably would like to extend, but at this point, I feel like you have to make a choice between Kawhi and Paul George, and I would choose Paul George because I can't trust Kawhi Leonard's knees to save my life. James Harden was decent as a point guard last year, but he cannot score the ball at will anymore. And Russ was what he was off the bench. He actually played pretty well off the bench to my surprise. But they sort of feel like a team where they're trapped. Like they need to make a lot of roster moves and they can't do a lot.
They're one of the older teams in the league,
Yep.
and that's kind of how they are gonna be for a little bit. Now, I think the way I would see with the Clippers is this. They are going to probably have to move on from Paul George, and I think that's what they're going to do. I don't think they want to do it, but they know that business is business at the end of the day. You've already screwed yourselves by signing Kawhi to that extension. You've screwed yourselves. You're trapped with him. That's the guy you've mortgaged for since he's went to your team. Now, we all know they lost the Paul George deal. So I think rather than having him re-sign, just let him walk. Let him go to a Philadelphia or an Orlando. I've heard that name for Paul George. Let him leave. End that chapter of the Clippers lore. Because right now, if you do try to run it back, the only person I would bring back would be James Harden. Because just surprisingly, James Harden had a good playoffs. He showed up in that first round. Yeah, he had a down game or two, but James Harden did his role.
Him and
He
Paul
played well.
George both. I mean, game 4, they won it for him.
Yeah. Paul George, James Harden, they had to do what they had to do in the playoffs, and obviously injuries caught up to them. I think you bring back Harden and obviously have him with Kawhi. You let Paul go. Maybe you have to let James go. Maybe you just center your team around Kawhi and try and retool and get younger
What
guys
a day! What a
more
gamble
competitive.
that is. I mean, it could work. Toronto did it, and he stayed healthy, and they got the title out of it. But can you trust Kawhi to play 60 games?
No, you can't because
That's the problem.
his knee is just shot. Like his knees are not going well for him, and that's what happens when you mortgage it all. And that's what the Clippers did. It caught like if I'm telling you right now, if Kawhi was healthy in that Dallas series, they would have won.
Yep.
But they didn't, and that's they lost in 6 because their best player was hurt. And
And
in game
that can
2 and
sometimes be
3,
the
he didn't even
difference.
look good.
That can sometimes be the difference we talked about tonight of you being out in the first round and you maybe winning the damn title. I mean, it really does. It's unbelievable. All right, I'm going to ask you about one more team. This one hurts my heart because I thought for sure when they did this whole thing, it was going to work. And I tried defending this player for years. And you may think I'm a little bit crazy, but Austin, I think the Sixers have to have a grown up conversation. And I think it may be time to start over. And I think you may have to look at trading Embiid.
Um, I don't know why. I don't know why they haven't thought about it already, because it just seems like time and time and time and time their ceiling is the second round. And I'm not going to sit here and say that Philadelphia would have been anything better than what they were at the end of the year, because when Joel got hurt, it really messed up how that team was playing. They were playing
Tyrese
very
Maxey is a
well
good
before
player.
that
He's
injury.
clearly not a number one.
Yeah, they were playing very well before that injury for Joel. Obviously, when the injury happens, the roster's a mess. They make these moves that are just trying to keep them afloat. I would definitely start talking about maybe moving off of Joel and building around Maxey because he's the younger product, and see what you can do with Tyrese Maxey. And maybe you bring in a Paul George. Like I already said it earlier. Maybe you bring in Paul George to be a small forward. Tobias Harris is not going back. You let Jimmy Butler walk to pay Tobias Harris,
That
which
was
was
such a
stupid.
horrible decision. I said it at the time. By the way, I said when they lost that series to Toronto, I thought that was their best team. I thought they would have beat Golden State that year if they would have got to the finals. Like I thought that was it. I thought that was their team. And Kawhi Leonard just hit a great shot in Game 7, and that was basically the end of the Sixers run.
Mm-hmm. That was their best chance. We've seen what Jimmy Butler has done since leaving. It's clear that they needed to retain him. And the way I look at it for Philadelphia now is you have a guy in Joel Embiid who's probably never going to win you a title. That's just how the East is made out now. You got to go through Boston pretty much every year. Boston is a pretty good team. Just overall, they have a really good team. I don't trust in Embiid to get them over the Boston hump. He hasn't been able to do it before. He's still not going to be able to do it. Maybe you look into trading him to a team in the West that needs a big. I don't know. But regardless, I think Philadelphia may have to blow it up as well. Now, is that something that Nick Nurse would be willing to go through? I don't know. It's really not his choice. But I think you're going to, if you're not going to have the conversation this offseason, you go through this again, you're probably going to have it next offseason.
So let's move on and let's talk about what is sadly about to transpire, which is the fact that the NBA on TNT is after next season, reportedly no longer happening. The NBA is going to finalize its new media rights deal with ESPN/ABC, NBC, who's getting back in the NBA business, and Amazon Prime, what we know for the past few seasons have been covering the National Football League. I had said that, and this is just the way I feel. I kind of wish that it was NBC, Amazon, and TNT. I have not thought that ESPN's NBA coverage has lived up to what it should be. And I personally just feel like, and it's no disrespect to JJ Redick and Doris Burke, who I thought have done a good job. But I personally thought Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson and Mike Breen had the perfect chemistry, and ESPN blew it up essentially because Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson rightfully criticized the officiating in the NBA. So, what's your old thoughts on this media rights deal the NBA is about to sign on? Sounds like there's going to be a lot of streaming. Sounds like some less regular season games. Sounds like the reason why the NBA created the in-season tournament and play-in tournament was to get more high-profile games for these networks. But I don't know if it's really going to move the needle for the NBA product outside of salary cap expanding and maybe team expansion.
I personally, when I heard that NBC was getting back into the NBA business, I was thrilled because it's definitely a change of scenery. They had a bunch of old school big time games on NBC before, and I hope that they can get back to where they were before they let go of the rights, essentially. As for inside the NBA, it's going to be hard to not see that every time on Tuesday or Thursday. It really is going to be hard not seeing that. I really liked Ernie, Shaq, Kenny, Chuck. They're all fun to watch. In my opinion, they're the best show there is. And you're not going to have that anymore because reportedly TNT and Turner Broadcasting is in debt. And I don't know how much money they are in debt. I think it was around like 4 billion or 4 million. It was some crazy number, but they are in debt. And I don't know how, but that they just are. So they didn't have the money to pay. Regardless, I think that I really don't think of anything too much about the broadcasting side of things. It will be fun to see NBC on there. Maybe we see Shaq, Chuck, Kenny all go to NBC and they get like Adam Lefko or something, or just someone that has been able to run that, that basically the lead panelist type of person on these broadcasts. Who knows? We don't know. Maybe they pluck someone from ESPN. I truly do not know. But at the end of the day, it's just more of a money thing. I think it's going to be good for the NBA because they are going to try and grow a little more, and that's what you want. You want to try and grow to more audiences. Obviously the streaming side of it with Amazon Prime, I'm not really a fan of it. I wasn't a fan of it when the NFL did it, and I'm not a fan of Netflix going with the NFL as well. I'm definitely not a fan of that.
Which we will absolutely get to in about 10 minutes. So hold off on that because I have a question
Yeah.
for you on that.
Yeah, I don't like how these leagues are going to streaming services to show these games. I don't like Amazon Prime showing games. I don't like for baseball, for example, Apple TV. I don't have Apple TV. I'm not going to buy Apple TV for the occasional Friday night baseball game. I'm not. So again, it's all about money, and that's what these leagues want. And even though they're trying to grow the game, they're also stunting their growth due to you wanting that extra money for these other streaming companies to basically provide games. Moral of the story is, while I'm happy NBC is getting the rights, it sucks that TNT is not going to have it anymore. And like you said, I would much rather have TNT, NBC, Amazon Prime. That's it. You cut it at that. Because ESPN does have pretty bad coverage when it comes to, in my opinion, all their sports. They don't have good coverage anywhere. So
Outside of, I think, Monday Night Football, the broadcast booth with Joe and Troy, I think they have absolutely brought back some of the prestige of Monday Night Football, but even the countdown is not great. We know the NBA pre and post game is Michael Wilbon and Stephen A. talking about the Knicks when they don't even care about the Pacers. So it is what it is. I think the biggest thing for me is going to be there's been talk about Las Vegas and Seattle coming in as playoff or just as expansion teams. And I think that would mean that, those two teams would stay out west. You'd bring one team out east, which would probably be Memphis or, somebody like that. What I'm worried about is Austin, historically in the NBA, and the Pacers may be trying to break this trend, and Miami did somewhat last year. But there are only a handful of teams in NBA history that have been a lower seed to make the finals. And there's only been two teams that have not been top three seeds in the history of basketball to win an NBA championship. And Dallas would obviously, and Indiana would break that streak this year. But if you're going to have 32 teams, 10 teams each in the playoffs, if you include the play in, that's 20 teams. Like that to me feels like it's so many games, it's so many playoff teams. It sort of doesn't feel like some of these teams have earned their way into the playoffs. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong, but I love the intrigue it adds. As a fan, I love this intrigue that these lower ended seeds really do just start making their way up the ladder when it comes around to the postseason. Again, we saw Miami last year. They ran the table and went to the finals. I love that. That's a huge storyline. I love the underdog storyline. And especially when you're the last seed in and you're a playing team. I love that storyline. And yeah, the games may add up. It might be too many games. But that's also that's the grind of being a professional athlete. That's your job. Like, I'm not trying to like belittle, but that is literally your job to play basketball for a grand audience who is willing to pay, whether that is by way of TV with the streaming or by going to the game, and they're willing to buy your merchandise. Like, you have so many people willing to invest in you. Again, it's with the NFL, it's with the MLB. The size of games, they don't matter. Like, you're still making your money and you're a professional athlete, so you have to deal with that. Now, with expansion, I want to get to that because I know I didn't touch on that last time. Seattle 1000% deserves a team. That is the first team off the bat I'm giving an expansion to. And yeah, they're probably going to give it to Vegas as well. And if they were to move a team from the West to the East, I think you keep New Orleans in the West. And I think the debate should be between Minnesota or Memphis.
That's what I feel
Minnesota,
like too.
Minnesota would be better travel for Milwaukee and Chicago, who are already in the East. Memphis, when you look at the geographical line, they're probably closer to that eastern side. Regardless, I think Minnesota or Memphis should be the two teams that are being discussed. You could discuss New Orleans as well, but I think New Orleans is going to stay in the West because they're close to Houston and they're close to Texas.
I'll
And
tell you what, with this current phase of the T Wolves, I would love to see and crew come out east. I think it would add
oh yeah,
so much more intrigue to the east. It would give you the one because let's face it, Jason Tatum, he's technically a superstar, I guess, but he doesn't. You know what I mean? It's not like he doesn't ooze off your TV screen. He doesn't give that superstar ooze. Like Giannis has been hurt the last two postseasons, and Embiid's been hurt. Like Anthony Edwards will walk in and change the East immediately.
he would. And it would add a lot of intrigue to the East, which is already, in my opinion, a pretty big deal in opposition to years prior outside of, LeBron. I think the East has been better than it was now than even with LeBron because it was literally LeBron heavy. But again, I would like to see this current rendition of the Timberwolves go to the East because number one, obviously the travel, I've already said that it'd be easier travel for some of those up north teams who are already in the East. It would just make it easier. And number two, the way Minnesota plays is just crazy and it would add better quality games. And you're probably moving that team to the Central.
Yep.
So I don't know what team you're going to kick out, but you're probably moving a team to Central or you're just cutting divisions in full because divisions don't mean anything anymore in the NBA. It's
Nope.
only for scheduling games.
Like that clip from the Bridgewater podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Bridgewater podcast right here on YouTube.